But today, I'm your dictator for one day only. Tim's away, so it's my show. We'll see if anybody can keep up. Thank you guys for all tuning in. We've got some really good stories coming up tonight. I'm excited to be able to talk to you about the chaos that is both the U.S. and the global sphere. But before we get started tonight, I have to give a shout out to our sponsor. I know you guys love them. I love them too. It's Cast Brew Coffee. Look, you drink coffee. People buy coffee. You know someone has coffee. This is a match made in caffeine heaven. Buy it, drink it, love it, and help us do the work that we do here. I'm really appreciative of everyone who supports this. I know Ian, who's the captain of Ian's Graphene Dream, is really hoping that you'll help him beat Alex Stein, who's trying to sell you just insane amounts of caffeine. You guys can battle out in sales with your checkbooks. And again, you're helping us do our work here, so I appreciate that. It's also important to me that you go over to timcast.com, become a member. Support all the shows that we do there. We've got Pop Culture Crisis. We've got Tim's Daily Shows. There's all kinds of fun stuff. Being a member means that you can join our Discord. After 6 months, you can call in, ask us questions, or you can join at $25 level. Again, that supports our work. It allows us to continue to do the work here. And if you join today, you can officially say that you joined during the Brimcast Empire, and that would be very meaningful to me. So again, thank you guys who are already members. Thank you for all your support. Tonight, we're joined by George Papadopoulos.
Thanks for having me.
Who are you? What do you do?
Hey, you know, I've been wanting to come on this show for so long because...
Brimcast specifically?
Exactly. You know, because you guys are doing incredible things, and I love the new studio. So congratulations on what everybody's doing out here. And look, I guess most people, in the U.S. and around the world know me as the guy who was on both Ben Carson's presidential campaign, then went to Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and then really got kind of sucked into a global surveillance conspiracy that was really designed to do two things: to subvert our democratic process and to spy on a presidential candidate and probably trying to undermine his entire administration. So I really got caught in the crosshairs of that, fought back. Others got caught in it. They fought back. And I think we're still reeling from it as a nation right now. So.
Well, that's all. I mean, you sound like you have lived basically some type of spy novel. So I'm really happy that you're here to tell us about your experience. You guys know him. You guys love him. Ian Crossland is here.
Thank you, Hannah Claire. Yeah, I'm with you on this one, George. Like, I have followed the what they call the Russia hoax from the outside. So I'm glad you're here because I want to hear about, from your perspective, what that looked like and what you guys were going through, what you particularly were going through. And we'll get to it on the show, man. I'm Ian Crossland. Follow me anywhere you can. See you later.
Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Labonte. I'm the lead singer of the heavy metal band All That Remains. I'm an anti-communist and a counter-revolutionary. Sup, homie?
Sup, bro? Let's get started, Hannah Claire.
Okay, so our first story for tonight. Putin vows deeper ties with Vietnam in visit criticized by the U.S. This is from the BBC. The leaders of Vietnam and Russia have said they want to boost ties since the pairs met in the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi. Vietnamese President To Lam was full of praise for his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, congratulating him on his recent re-election. Mr. Putin, in return, said strengthening a strategic partnership with both the Southeast Asian countries, with the Southeast Asia country was one of Russia's priorities. His trip to Vietnam, which comes on the heels of his lavish visit to North Korea, is being interpreted as a demonstration of the diplomatic support Russia still enjoys in the region. So Russia has long had a very tight connection to Vietnam. They supported Vietnam when it was warring with America and France. It also tends to support the educational ambitions of a lot of Vietnamese students. They'll go to Russia and study. Vietnam is also a major military industrial client for Russia. So the relationship between the two is long established and close-knit, even though the U.S. tends to treat Russia like it's an isolated country. Nobody talks to Russia. And this comes at an interesting time. Vietnam is one of the only countries that did not condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And as we know, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a major moment for the West. They really used it as a moment to economically and diplomatically sanction Russia. Again, further pushing this narrative that Russia is an isolated incident. George, you have a foreign policy background. I'm curious what you think of this move in terms of Russia and Vietnam's partnership.
Yeah, so going back to the 2016 Trump campaign, I was the only guy on the campaign who actually gave the interview to a Russian newspaper about sanctions. This was going to 2016. So the U.S., the Obama administration, obviously after Russia moved in on Crimea, decided to impose sanctions. And basically the argument always has been, like since Kissinger, if the U.S. tries to isolate Russia, they're going to do one thing, and that is they're going to go into China's hands. They're going to look east and not west. So this playbook, we've seen it over and over and over. Russia has basically created this fortress economy now where they're basically now immune to Western sanctions. You have the rise of the BRICS, which are basically trying to collapse the US dollar and redesign the world global economic order, the trade order. And this is exactly what Putin's doing. He's like, if Europe doesn't want to buy my gas, if Europe doesn't want to buy my oil, they don't want to buy my weapons, then North Korea wants to, Vietnam wants to, and I'm going to sell it to a discount to China, and China's going to help me out. And all of these countries now are growing as a collective GDP. The US dollar is slowly but maturely collapsing, and sanctions have been an utter failure. So we're probably going to see a lot more of this moving forward.
I don't understand why they're doing the sanctions. If this is the outcome, is that Russia moves away from the market entirely, it feels like a self-destructive move to sanction them. Knowing that, why would they do that? Well, here you can answer for them, but what do you think?
Well, here's what's interesting. So the U.S. actually comes out as a winner in this whole strategy, right? Because the U.S., under Trump at least, not with Biden, it was a net exporter of energy, oil and natural gas. It actually became a net exporter of energy for the first time since World War II. So at a time when these sanctions were imposed on Russia and they couldn't sell oil and gas to Europe, the U.S. started exporting to Europe. Then you had the sanctions, and then more weapons from the U.S. were being shipped to Europe. So that really is the situation, that Europe is actually the one that's going to really feel the brunt of this failed policy, while the U.S. really kind of gets better off, and China gets better off, and Russia kind of remains the same. So Russia's really Europe at the end of the day is really idiotic for following the U.S. sanctions policy, while the U.S. kind of wins out, Russia wins out, and China wins out.
And both the leaders of America and like President Biden and the president of China were both recently visiting Vietnam. I mean, I feel like Vietnam is really caught in this eccentric landscape where it is both courted by these major powers, but it also is something the major powers are courting. They need Vietnam to sort of work with them, even though it seems to be trying to stay, what do they call it, bamboo diplomacy, be friends with everybody.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because Vietnam and China have the South China Sea dispute, right? There's a lot of oil and natural gas in the South China Sea. There's a lot of merchant trade going through the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca. And Vietnam, ideally for the U.S., would have kind of been used as like a hedge against like a growing China, a growing, North Korea. So the U.S. in an ideal world would like to ally with countries like India, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam to kind of contain China. But that's not happening because these countries, they see what's going on with the sanctions with Russia, and they also see the lawfare in America. And you know what they say? You know what? If they could impose sanctions on Russia and freeze their assets in Western countries and try and destroy their economy, because they stood out of line, they could do it to us. So maybe we shouldn't follow the U.S. as much. And also, basically, they want alternatives in case the United States ends up doing what they did to Russia. So that's why China is stepping in and saying, look, we still want to do business. Russia says we still want to do business, but we're not going to try and change how you run your country. And that's what this entire new model that BRICS is trying to impose, and it's really devastating to the United States right now because Biden has not instilled leadership around the world.
So the U.S. Embassy in Hanoi has responded to this. I have this story from Time Magazine. It says the U.S. Embassy in Hanoi, in a statement Monday, said no country should give Putin a platform to promote his war of aggression and otherwise allow him to normalize his atrocities. Do you think that the U.S. condemnation of this trip is enough to deter other Asian nations from potentially pursuing a more diplomatic relationship with Russia? Or is the state of affairs in the Indo-Pacific so fraught that anyone could come in and become the major influencer there?
You know, geopolitics really abhors a vacuum, and there's a massive vacuum that's been created now around the world because of this lack of U.S. leadership or, just like failed foreign policy. So when Biden or Blinken or some of these administration folks try to intimidate China or Vietnam or North Korea or, Singapore or some of these other countries, they're not going to put their lot in with the U.S. because they simply don't want to be burdened with what democracy promotion means in Southeast Asia.
Do you get the sense that there's an attempt by the administration to be in any way aggressive? Because it's my sense that, like, granted, Donald Trump was, as people would say, that he was bombastic and stuff, but there wasn't a lot of question from people as to whether or not he would do, whether or not he would strike. He was a loose cannon, they thought, but he was unpredictable enough where it seemed legitimate when he would make a threat. I call to mind Blinken's trip to Alaska, where he met with his Chinese envoy. I forget what his name was. But they made it clear the United States is not in a position that makes China feel like they have to worry about what the United States is going to do. This is directly related to, obviously, to the current administration, because that was not the way that China behaved during the Trump administration. So I don't imagine that the administration really believes any kind of comments that they make like that. Do you? I mean...
No, because the results speak for themselves, and the U.S. has absolutely no strategy when it comes to dealing with countries like China. Biden, with all of the allegations that have been made about shady money coming into the coffers of the Biden family from various countries, many would argue that he's been compromised because of stuff like that his son was dealing with these Chinese energy companies, CFFC. They have the Ukrainian issues. So basically, when these countries that have been giving millions of dollars in shady money to his son and potentially his family say, this guy's not going to do anything because we potentially have something on him. I mean,
not just to put a button on, I'm not in any way, I don't doubt whether or not the Bidens are corrupt or anything like that, but I don't think that the behavior of other countries is because of any kind of leverage that they might have. I really think it's just that they don't respect them and don't think they'll do anything, that is what they communicate.
That tends to be my perspective too, that Biden has positioned himself so weakly, both in terms of the deals that he makes. Yeah. He has a mess. I mean, he's in my opinion, created several wars. And then he also just physically looks weak, right? You never see him enter a meeting where he seems to be the one really commanding the room.
And this is what I think
communicates to everyone that ultimately the U.S. is in a vulnerable position right now.
And that's what I think really is at issue here. It's not as much as I'm like, again, I don't have a whole lot of doubt about whether or not the Bidens are corrupt. They have been in government for 47 years or whatever, and they've made millions of dollars, et cetera. I'm sure that there's plenty of stuff that people can come up and say, oh, this was somehow underhanded and et cetera. But I really don't think that is the thing that actually could touch Americans on a real basis, because the vulnerability and that the weakness that the administration communicates to other countries, that's what can actually touch Americans, right? That's what can make, can really affect people. If the Bidens are corrupt, whatever, like, I'd love to see him in jail, but it's not going to change, Joe down the street's life. If there's some kind of international conflict or Joe's kid has to go fight in a war, that's going to change Joe's life. And that's what matters, right? I mean, that's my sense.
And that's what the stark and diametrically opposed foreign policy of Biden and Trump is, right? It's about peace through strength and American exceptionalism and revitalizing American industries and uniting America under the banner of red, white, and blue and God, right? And that's what Trump was all about. While with Biden, we've never been more divided. There's an open border, which is wreaking chaos at home. Inflation is rampant. He cut off American energy exports that we just talked about a little earlier, which created this economic crisis that we're living in. So when you're weak domestically, it's kind of hard to project power abroad. And I completely agree with you that our adversaries and our allies are watching this very closely, and they're and our allies are terrified, and our foes are emboldened because of it.
I think that's a really good point. I'm going to jump to this next story just touching on the fact that our foes are feeling emboldened. You mentioned the border. We have the story from the New York Post. Hundreds of migrants from ISIS hotbed country have crossed the U.S. border under Biden. So the number of migrants flocking to the U.S.-Mexico border from a country known as a hotbed of ISIS recruitment has skyrocketed under President Biden. More than 1,500 migrants from Tajikistan are known to have crossed the border between October 2020 and May of 2024, according to leaked border data obtained by the Post. At least 500 Tajiks have been caught so far this year. Over the previous 14 years, there were just 26 Tajik nationals crossing the border. It's unknown how many Tajik migrants were released into the U.S., but the vast majority of migrants caught at the border claim asylum and are allowed to stay while they await a court hearing. The small Central Asian country, which borders both China and Afghanistan, has become a major source of terrorists for ISIS and ISIS-K, an extreme offshoot of the Islamic State militant group. I think the border is one of Biden's biggest failings. I think the border was one of the things that really led to Trump's election in 2016. This country has been in free fall in terms of this issue for a long time. There are humanitarian issues. There are national security issues. And it just is not something that the Biden administration has successfully messaged on ever, in my opinion. The first day in office, he went through and reversed a ton of Trump positions, and what for? To say, look, he was the bad guy and I'm the good guy. Then we saw an increase in illegal immigration. Then later they say, actually, that was the Republicans' fault. Actually, that was Trump's fault. And slowly sort of roll back a lot of Trump policies. The thing is, there are, what do we think, 10 million illegal immigrants in this country
like
at this
that
point?
is what I've heard, yeah.
A number that we actually can't even track at all. And it makes me wonder, is this reversible? Because we know that it's military-age men from other countries, from China, from Tajikistan, coming in to the U.S. illegally. We have no idea where they are. We have no reason to believe that they will show up for these court dates that are often set years out. Is this a problem that you guys think that we can reverse with a change in leadership? Or is there any hope that Biden's policies would ever fix this?
No, you can't. I don't think it can be reversed. I think it can be transmuted. The momentum is going in one direction, which is people are flowing into this country. I don't think that it's going to be as easy as now you go home and you go home. You could get people to like self-deport. There are tactics that we could implement to kind of change the momentum from this massive influx to kind of an outflux, potentially.
I mean, I'm not quite so hopeful about that. Although the more you limit benefits that the government gives out, the more people will say, okay, it's not worth me being here. It's more difficult. But then people that are relying on benefits from the government, I don't think that there should be these benefits, but the people that are Americans that are relying on them, they're going to get hurt too, which is not something that is popular. Generally, it's not a popular position.
I agree with you. Benefits do attract a lot of illegal immigrants, but if you're motivated by terrorism, right? If you are coming into the U.S. with malintent already, actually, it's not even the benefits that you're here for. And that is almost more terrifying because there is no way to deter them but a strong border policy.
Well, what's interesting about these people from Tajikistan, so there was a major terrorist attack in Russia in March of this year. Yeah. And the guys who committed that atrocity actually came from Tajikistan. See, Russia's actually been dealing with a lot of Islamist-related terror going back to the 90s from Chechnya, Dagestan. Even before then. Obviously, you have the Soviet Union and Afghanistan, the Taliban, the Mujahideen. So they know what these people are up to. They're not here to do manual labor or some minimum wage job. These people are potentially coming here to do something nefarious. And that's something that I think should terrify Americans.
I think young people today, and I'm talking about people probably Gen Z and stuff, they probably don't have the same kind of sense that people my age, I assume you're probably in your 40s, you're about my age or so. But like, I remember what it was like, on September 11th. And so my idea of something not being possible, that stopped. Right. As soon as that day happened, I remember all before then, it was like, comic book stuff that, it was just, it didn't happen. After you saw that kind of thing, then it was like, oh, wow, that is actually possible. And you see these smaller, surprising things happen in other countries, like the October 7th attack, right? There's arguments about whether or not the government let it happen or not. If there was an attack like that from some terrorist attack like that in the United States by people that got through the southern border, it would be just as legitimate to say it was the American government's fault because they allowed it. And to think that with the numbers of people, right, if there's 10 million people that have come over in the past 4 years, to think that most people can't really comprehend how many people 10 million is. And you could easily slip 50,000 people with a similar goal through the border in that time, without a doubt, and still be like, you're still not getting like 1 out of 10 dudes that are bad guys. It's a significantly small number, but it's still enough where if they get together, they could cause some kind of significant real problem that would, cost lives on the order of 9/11 or the October 7th attack in Israel, and that's real.
Going off what you just said, right? So $85 billion of military equipment was left to the Taliban in Afghanistan. You have potentially millions of black market arms in Ukraine right now, and you have Islamist terrorist groups operating in Venezuela and other, Southern American, Central American countries right now. Put that all in tandem with an open border, with these type of guys coming through, military-aged Chinese nationals coming through. Obviously, our border is our soft underbelly, and if you are an enemy of the United States, you're not that is where you're aiming, and that's something why the border is such a critical policy issue. It's a national security issue, and in my opinion, it's the most important election issue of this year.
Just the fact that there are foreign people acting as a police force to police the other nationals. Like there are Chinese people here acting as police that are policing, like that. The FBI is involved in this. Like this isn't just make believe. This is actual things that are happening, and the administration is doing its best to not alarm the American people and not let the American people find out. And it's because the policy that they have is actually to get as many people in and then naturalize or give amnesty. I mean, they're talking about it now. I don't know what the specific policy that Biden is discussing, but I heard something about it the other day.
Giving amnesty or opening pathways to permanent residency.
So I don't know the details, but that's coming. That is unquestionably coming.
Spouses
and that's the intent.
of American citizens, based on they have to have been in the country for the last 10 years. They have to be married to an American citizen. Potentially also opens the door for if they have any children. I think that the American people are starting to agree with you. We see this consistently in polls that immigration is if not one of the top issues going into this election. And it's also consistently somewhere where the Biden administration fails to message correctly. Do you think that Trump has an advantage, or do you think that this is something that he needs to get stronger on as he goes into November?
I think Trump said it best. I think right when Biden ascended to the Oval Office, he said, all Joe had to do was go to the beach, lay back, leave my policies intact, and everything would have been fine, especially when it comes to the border. So, and polls will reflect this. Obviously, Trump is way ahead when it comes to what Americans think is the best policy moving forward of how you should actually deal with the border, and that is enforce the border, remain in Mexico policy, support our border officials down there, and just give them the ability to deport these people once they're actually in the United States. Biden has handcuffed our folks from not being able to do anything, just like he's handcuffed police officers around the United States from not prosecuting various criminals in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. So I think once Trump's back and he has a Congress that actually plays with him, unlike his first term, I think he can get the wall done. All we needed was around $6 to $8 billion to get it done the first term. Obviously, with all the Mueller nonsense and all that, and the rhino subverting him from within, he wasn't able to do it. But I think once he has his right team in place, we get that border up and running. We support our people down in the borders. We'll be okay.
I think the border is key to this administration. I also think having stronger messaging on immigration is important in terms of the global stage. One of these stats that occasionally Republicans will reference from Border Patrol is that an increase in the number of people on the FBI most wanted on terrorist watch lists are obtained at the border. And people will think, oh, well, but if it's more people under Biden, isn't that good? And the thing is, under Trump, they didn't come at all. They knew that the punishments would be severe. They knew there were consequences. They stayed away. I think the American people are starting to realize that the southern border is like your front door. And if you leave it wide open and you know your neighborhood is dangerous, then it's not that crazy when bad things start to happen inside your home if someone comes in. And I think people are really begging to be able to lock the front door and be able to protect the people inside their home.
Yeah, and all states are border states now. I mean, we've seen the scourge of, we've seen a lot of people go through, very unfortunate incidents, if you understand what I'm saying, because of some of these people coming through the border, some very high profile that the president has actually spoken about. And I think the more and more this becomes prevalent and just like in your face, and it's not going to simply be like an economic issue, which I think conservatives initially made it about. It's like, oh, they're going to come and take your jobs. Now it's kind of like, this is a security risk.
Yeah. Did your time on because you started with the Carson campaign and then you moved to the Trump campaign. Did your switch influence your view on immigration, or did you always feel as though this was a serious issue?
Look, my grandfather came to the United States from Greece in the 50s legally, worked his butt off, did all the things right. My wife, Simona, she's a legal immigrant from Italy. We've gone through a very long process, a very expensive process to get that going for her. So when I have lived this process coming from like immigrant grandparents, seeing what they went through, and then knowing that they did the right thing for me just as a boy, like growing up in Chicago, I'm like, you have to do it this way. Like you have to abide by the law because first of all, if you don't have a border, you don't have sovereignty. And if you don't have sovereignty, you don't have rules. And then the entire country collapses. So in my opinion has always been that since a young boy. It didn't change when I joined Carson's campaign. It certainly didn't change when I joined Trump's campaign. In fact, it was only more emboldened.
I had no idea how important the border security issue was. In 2015, when Trump was talking about the wall, I was like, okay, I kind of get it.
It wasn't on my radar either. I was like, what?
Nothing.
Where have you guys been?
I had no idea the fentanyl crisis. I had no idea that drugs were getting run. Like, I knew drugs were getting run. I just thought it was cocaine.
Was it because people didn't talk about it, or was it because you were discouraged, like talking about the border?
No one talked about
racist?
it. I don't think I'd even heard of fentanyl till after Trump was elected. Then, or the fentanyl problem started to be equated as a problem was like after Trump, and it wasn't him that was doing it. He's like prophesied some
been in
problem.
effect for a long time. The fentanyl crisis has been, I mean, it's really the opioid epidemic that led into the fentanyl crisis.
And the Chinese making the medicine and sending it to Mexican drug cartels. Maybe Trump knew about that. He just wasn't really talking about the Chinese opioids at all. But man, kudos to that guy for having eyes on that, on the prize. Like a decade before it became a problem, he was talking about how it's going to become a problem. We need to fix it.
We're going to jump to the next segment. Sorry to cut. I don't know who I'm looking at. Sorry to cut you off, Phil. Because we're talking about President Trump, I think it behooves us to talk a little bit about the upcoming debate. I saw this really interesting article from Axios today. The meme debate: Trump and Biden enter viral battlefield. I know cheap fakes is everyone's favorite term right now, but I like viral battlefield because I think that speaks to what we're going through as a country and as a culture. President Biden's team is waging waging a furious campaign, not just against the former President Trump, but against a viral internet culture that threatens his image with key undecided voters. 1 week from today, Biden and Trump will square off in a debate likely to spawn millions of online memes, TikToks, and rapid response videos churned out by both campaigns. For Biden, the CNN showdown is a prime opportunity to expose voters to some of Trump's radical rhetoric and unpopular positions on issues like abortion. For Trump, and a right-wing ecosystem that thrives off highlighting Biden's, quote, senior moments, the debate is a chance to drive home why so many voters think the president isn't up to the job. So I think debates are somewhat useless. You know, we get these long form debates, so they're 2 hours, and you have to take time talking. And typically with debates, somebody gets a rebuttal. We know that for the most part, moderators are biased. A lot of them tend to lean towards the Democratic opponent. I'll reference one of my favorite studies done by a professor I had at SMU, Ben Voth. He would study every debate and count how many words per minute were said, how many interruptions there were, how many fact checks. And he found consistently over years that while Democrats speak for longer, Republicans say more words per minute, meaning they're speaking more quickly to accommodate for any kind of obstacle they have on the field. But I think this article from Axios about the viral battlefield is really important. And I think it speaks to the difference between the generations. For older voters who remember the impact of debates with Nixon, debates with JFK, the way debate culture has shifted in America is to be in favor of the internet. We all have to think back to 2016. One of the things that rings out in my mind is Trump's "you'd be in jail," right? That moment lives on in infamy because of the internet. And candidates that are able to leverage the internet are able to really change the way, the momentum of their campaign. Let's remember Vivek Ramaswamy when he was debating in public. He held up that clipboard and we watched it on the show going, that's going to be a meme. You have this clipboard that anyone can make blank with a message. They know what they're doing. They know that if they're able to use the internet, it can really help them. But I'm going to follow up this story really quickly with some news about donations to the campaign. So we have this story, the Winklevoss twins over here. They are, the Winklevoss twins, formerly from Facebook, I guess.
The Winklevi?
The Winklevi, yes. So each one has given $1 million in crypto to President Donald Trump, in large part because they say that the Biden administration is weaponizing the banking system against crypto companies and their principles. They say that the Biden administration has openly declared war against crypto. It has weaponized multiple government agencies to bully, harass, and sue good actors in our industry in an effort to destroy it. The crypto industry is obviously a huge part, I think, of the same internet culture that this Axios article is warning us against. People who are aware of the advantageous nature of innovation that thrives online. I'm just scanning down a little bit because there's a line in here that I find really interesting. The Winklevoss one, I think this is Tyler Winklevoss, but I believe they put out the same statement, said, and yet the crypto industry is not alone. The Biden administration has consistently attacked American business across the board and villainizes its greatest heroes. The crime is always a success, and the reward is always ridicule, fine, and even more red tape. But to be clear, the Biden administration does not hate success outright, only the kind that lives outside of its control. That's interesting, right? Because so much of the internet seems to be outside the Biden's control. And I'm sorry to our listeners, but I'm jumped to one more story. Billionaire Biden supporters, this is from Forbes, billionaire Biden supporters launched $10 million effort to combat unflattering videos. So there's a pro-Biden super PAC backed by tech billionaires, Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovitz and LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman is reportedly launching a social media campaign to catch up with former President Trump's social media success, including a string of unflattering videos about President Biden. Future Forward USA Action is raising at least $10 million for the project, which will include a study of how social media algorithms have facilitated Republicans in sharing videos of Biden appearing to look awkward or confused in public. I think 2024 is the internet's election. I think what we're seeing is that no one really understands the power of the internet. And even though we believe there's a lot of left-wing bias in social media algorithms, we know, Gmail would filter Republican campaign emails, and they would allow more left-leaning or Democratic emails to go through. Even though we can see that certain topics are censored online in one way, people really credit Elon Musk with changing X in that case. Ultimately, someone feels like the internet is still up for grabs, and this is something that apparently the Biden campaign thinks favors right-wingers. What's your take on this?
Well, I don't think that it does favor right-wingers. I think that there is far too much information that is put out by the legacy media, and there's still a sense in most Western countries with what you would consider the normies that the place to go for news is CNN or NBC or what have you. And I don't think that has really changed enough where that narrative, the narrative that is the quote unquote official narrative, I don't think it's changed enough where that's not the official narrative. I think that they want to do whatever they can to limit the reach of alternative news sources and alternative views, because that's what governments do. They want to have a narrative, and especially seeing as I like to harp about the NDAA of 2012 because of the Smith Modernization Act, which made it legal for the federal government to propagandize the American people. Essentially, the federal government wasn't allowed to have an opinion that they essentially put forward, and that was in the original Smith-Mundt Act, and that was in response to the Nazis propagandizing their own people in World War II. So it was put in after World War II, sometime after World War II, or near the end of World War II, or something like that. Was the original Smith-Mundt Act, and the Modernization Act essentially just repealed it. And it was repealed because at that time the government had seen the stuff that had gone on with Occupy, and it had seen what had gone on with the Arab Spring, and the powers that be could not allow to the power vacuum, essentially, because the government knows that if it doesn't have a narrative that it's pushing, then another narrative will fill that in, just like any other power vacuum. So it changed the law so the government could go ahead and propagandize the American people. And ever since then, there has been an official government message. And the legacy media has had no problem giving that message out. And the reason is because if they play ball with the government, they get access to the government, and they get to hang out with Barack Obama, and they get to go to nerd prom, the correspondence dinner, and they get access. They can talk to the cool people and the powerful people. That alone is worth money. And you don't need money, because the money is money allows you to affect the world. So money is in effect a certain amount of power. If you can have access to people that are in positions of power, then you don't need the money. It's the access, it's the power. So this idea that the government or that the internet is a problem is because it's a problem for the government. And I don't think that this is something. I think this is something that we should look for. We should look for the government to have as little ability to push a narrative as possible, because the government, the more the government has an opinion, the bigger the government's going to be, and you want to limit the government as much as possible. It's the biggest government in the world.
I agree that the internet has become a problem for the power structure, this centralized authority, the United States government, whatever, this liberal economic order. It's like a thorn in the side. You were saying that though the legacy media and this perverted message that's being sent out by the CIA, I don't know, but the Smith Modernization Act got rid of the ability, the stopping the government from propagandizing people. You're saying that that's enough of a force, using the legacy media to keep people in the dark. But I feel like it's not, and that the people are awake, and that they're using machines to flip votes 51-49. And it's just such a demoralizing feeling. But maybe it's the age of the meme, but I think it's the age of the machine. We're in the age of the machine now, and the machines are running the show. And if we don't have the code to these machines, and we're just trusting them to tally our votes, even if 99% of the people are awake, the machine just tells us that only 49% of us were awake. And then no one stood up to be like, well, show me the code. Show me the proof that that's what the machine said.
But that's kind of apparently what this pro-Biden pack is doing, right? They're saying the algorithm, and I presume that's all operated under code, is supporting Trump people. It's making Trump people better at the internet. Do you think that's true, or do you think there's just a cultural difference between the way someone who's maybe conservative online operates versus someone who identifies as progressive?
I think Trump was tapped into the truth in a way that other political candidates, Bernie Sanders was a little bit. He was more like, look at the world. The U.S. is getting screwed right now. He didn't know that the liberal economic order was getting transitioned to this new world order that they've been talking about. I don't think he was really that aware of this plan that they've had for 30 years, but he was at least pointing out what he would see when he would see it. And that was what was resonating with people in the memes, just this dude's willingness to say exactly what he thought.
You're not Sanders?
Well,
Trump.
Donald Trump. Okay. That's why he was so popular with the internet and with just humans in general. You're like, hey, at least he's being honest. Well, I'm not saying every time he spoke he's being honest, but for the most part, when he talks,
he feels more authentic to voters. Yeah.
What do you say, George?
No, I was going to say, like, in 2016, Trump had, carte blanche, right, on the media. They would give him unlimited time on MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and that kind of really helped propel him. And then when you add that with Twitter, now X, and his force that he was in 2016 on that, it really helped propel him to the White House, right? Because he was able to shift the narrative and create and control the narrative away from the mainstream media because of that unlimited airtime. Go to 2020, he was completely suppressed because they couldn't control him or the narrative anymore. Then you had the 51 intelligence officers suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story, which obviously tilted the election in many ways. And now moving forward in this election, X is probably more important than ever. What you do on social media allows you to get your message to millions of people, especially after Elon Musk purchased it, where it's not suppressed anymore, it's not controlled. And I think he has to be on X. I know he's primarily on Truth Social and all this, but he really needs to start posting on X as well.
Do you think so? Because there are so many accounts that just they exist to clip what he put on Truth and get it on X. His message is still there, even if he is staying loyal to his own brand and company, I guess.
It is, but he's the man, and I think when he speaks, it's his message, it's his presidency, it's his campaign at the end of the day. When I was on the campaign, I was one of many on the campaign. He was the candidate. Then he became president. So his voice amplifies the message much more so than even the most ardent loyalist supporters out there, which I'm definitely one of them. I know others are on there, but I think he really needs to, and going to the debate, some people argue that he shouldn't even debate Biden. I think, just like the voting system, play by the books, play by the rules that the Democrats are playing by. Go do the debate and actually let your voice be heard to millions of people that probably would never hear what you're talking about, what your platform really is about America. So this notion that he should not debate, that he should kind of keep quiet, I think is just very detrimental to his candidacy.
I'd love to see him on X posting again. I don't know why he's not. Yeah. I haven't talked to him about maybe that he's on contract with Truth Social. He's trying to pump the value of Truth Social by being exclusive there for now. I don't know, but it's like the time, I get it. He's running a lot of businesses and a campaign's expensive. I want to say like the time of money.
He strategically goes back to X. Like when the mugshots came out, that was their post, right? They posted on X this link to buy the merch that they had made with his mugshot from Georgia when he was arrested there. I find this deeply fascinating because Trump could basically, it feels like, talk to himself in a room, and eventually someone would find a way to get his message out there because people are so curious to hear what he has to say. I mean, the fact that you were able to launch a social media campaign a social media platform in large part to just hear from Donald Trump. I know there are other people on there. It's not something Biden seems to be able to do, right? The internet doesn't respond. I mean, you said this. The internet is more interested in Trump than it is in Biden. I'm thinking about when he went to that UFC fight, right? And he got on TikTok. Biden campaign has been on TikTok for months, and they were, 500,000 followers. Huge number. Trump, by the end of the weekend, had over 4 million people following him. I mean, it just seems like Biden is completely unable to capture the internet's interest, despite how many influencers they invite to the White House, despite how many, Joe Biden or Dark Brandon memes they try to come up with. Is it all personality, or is there something else keeping Biden from thriving online?
I think that it's probably the fact that the content that he produces or would produce, because all the stuff that I've seen that's gone on TikTok and stuff like that, it gets really torn apart by the right. And this could be just my impression, but it's very rarely do they get a meme or whatever that actually does a positive thing for them. Most of the time, it ends up being some kind of bad thing like that. I mean, a lot of times they'll go and promote LGBT stuff, and then the person they're promoting does some real whacked out crazy ass, like pulling their top down so their fake boobs are hanging out on the White House lawn, or
classy bunch of people,
or stealing people's luggage and wearing women's clothes to events. Like, it doesn't work out so well for them. So I think that they have a problem figuring out which memes actually are going to, get the positive traction that they're looking for. There are some Dark Brandon ones that, as much as I personally don't find them compelling, there are some that have worked, but overall they're not doing so well.
The thing about the Dark Brandon and the devilish, demonic Biden memes that don't really work is that he's actually doing kind of demonic stuff with his political power and his ambivalence, like his inability to command in Afghanistan, overseeing a forfeit and a fleeing route, but like the way he's prosecuting political dissidents that he doesn't like, or that he's allowing things to happen, that he's allowing, this most recent committee, this January 6th committee, apparently is running without having a House minority member in the right position. They're still trying to function like normal, but they're functioning out of turn.
They did function for a long time, and there was no one kind of puncturing that.
Like, if you want to make a meme out of a good guy and make him like, look how dark he can be, that's one thing. But if he's actually secretly a villain, you're kind of just exposing it for later. I think they know that when they see that, they're like, damn, this is going to look really bad in 20 years.
I think that's why the basement strategy worked so well during the campaign, because the less the American people saw of Biden, the better it was for him. So the more they try to meme him or to put him out there on TikTok or on X or Facebook or whatever, or even give national interviews, the worse it is for them. And I don't think they can do that right now, because actually I think there are other Democrats that are breathing down Biden's neck right now. I think they sense a weak man, a weak president. They think that their party is in a state of introspection right now. It's going through like this schizophrenic, self-destructive mode where you have this 80-year-old white guy, but then you have the extreme left pushing various agendas. He's kind of like been always, who he's been 50 years in DC, and they don't know really what to do with him. And he's not popular, not only within his own party, but with the American people. So there's nothing you can really do, actually. So I think it actually backfires the more they try and promote him.
Yeah, I do too. And I think it's strange, especially in the beginning of his time in office. I felt like his team accidentally presented him as the villain way too often. I'm thinking about this speech, and I believe it was in Philadelphia, where, they had this historic building lit up behind them, but it was in like this crazy dark blue and red color.
I have used the
And he's at the
absolute
podium.
heck out of that picture. That is a gift. I took that, and then he's got this where he said something like the MAGA Republicans are a threat to the very soul of our nation. Superimpose that. It's a great meme. Thank you very much, Biden team.
Right.
I mean, and that really drives home the point. It's like, this is not the kind of behavior that you actually want from a United States, from the American government. And if you look at if you go down all of the things that they've done, the lawfare, the attacking their political opponents, it is absolutely, without a doubt, in 30, 40 years, I don't know what America is going to look like, but there's going to be people somewhere that are going to look at the actual history of what's going on. They're going to say America turned into the countries that it went and destabilized to get the governments out because they called them dictatorships. It is doing the exact same stuff. It's trying to put people in jail that have the wrong political opinions. It's using the IRS to attack people for the wrong political opinions. They're going after people that were the lawyers of Donald Trump for Trump. All of this stuff is trumped up charges. This is unprecedented, and hopefully the American people wake up and see what's going on and decide they don't want to do it anymore, because that's what happened in Cambodia. Like, Pol Pot had taken over, and like the communists were totally in control, and they were killing millions of people. And then the people of Cambodia just said, we're not doing this anymore. And they didn't have to have a war to get Pol Pot out of power or anything. They didn't have to kill him. The killings just stopped because they said, we're not doing this. And hopefully the American people can say, okay, well, you have to stop. We're not doing this in America anymore. And we can have a resolution the way that they did in Cambodia without the dying, hopefully. Praying, that's what I'm hoping for.
Ideally.
That's the best case scenario. And it's possible because it did happen in Cambodia. But we have to make people aware that there is a problem. And right now, the average American doesn't even acknowledge that there is a massive problem in the United States federal government.
Well, what the Democrats have really done is they've normalized the selective and politically motivated targeting of dissent writ large in America. You've seen Catholics targeted, you've seen parents targeted, school teachers, and now a former president of the United States has been raided, indicted, and convicted. And normally, let's say a dictatorship or a tin pot country, whatever you want, a banana republic, whatever term you want to use, weaponizes the legal system in pursuit of stifling dissents and trying to maintain power. Those kind of countries are universally condemned or sanctioned. But we're in this bizarro world right now where when the Biden DOJ does it, they go on MSNBC and they're championed like they're the Avengers, like supporting justice in America. So I think we have to look at just numbers, right? When Trump was convicted, when he was indicted, and when he was raided, he raised money and his poll numbers went up. In normal times, if a political candidate or a political person has even like a small little scandal, they're out of political office. They're out of the public sphere. This is the kind of era we're living in where so many Americans are sick and tired of what is happening. So I do think people are waking up. And when Trump says, if they can do it to me, they'll do it to you, I think that really resonates.
Yeah, I actually think that speaks to the impact of the internet, right? The images of Trump going in and out of court, the fact that he held a press conference and it was basically clipped and shared repeatedly everywhere, reminded people of sort of the ongoing nature of the judicial persecution of Trump. And I think that is very terrifying for Americans who could not afford the lawyers that Trump can, who could not afford to be away from work. Their work doesn't follow them around and meet them outside the courthouse the way that Trump does. And ultimately, I think you were kind of talking about before how the bunker campaign works for Biden, right? Because if he's out of sight, he's out of mind, and you don't think about all of the problems that he causes or his legacy as a senator in America. But with Trump, they wanted to silo him. They wanted him to be court. They wanted no one to be able to talk about him so that they could direct the narrative. And instead, all eyes turned to him. The internet followed him there. And the more Trump is in front of an audience, the more he performs, and the more the American people feel as though they are like him, I think.
I completely agree, and that's actually why I think that Judge Merchan is going to sentence him to some sort of home confinement, because look, this has been a 9-year systematic lawfare operation against a private citizen, president candidate, in order to prevent him from ascending to power as a populist, nationalist president or candidate that really can be exported around the world. And that's why in Europe right now, you're also seeing the global wave of conservatism reverberating, because even over there, it's like with Thatcher and Reagan, right? You had them kind of working as a team to export that around the world. Now you're seeing Trump doing it as well. And in Europe, people are following him. So I think that's the real scare. So what Trump, I think, has to do, because he's probably going to get some sort of confinement, he won't be able to campaign. That's actually been probably the objective of all of this lawfare. He has to go out and choose who he's going to pick for his vice president, his attorney general, FBI director, director of national intelligence, and CIA director, because that's what he keeps talking about. He's going to clean house. He's going to drain the swamp. Those are the folks that are going to end up doing it, and they're going to go on the campaign trail for him while he probably is going to be in home confinement. So he really needs to pick those people probably before he does go to sentencing.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I think Trump should be upfront and clear about his staffing picks as soon as possible, because I think the American people would respect him more and feel more trust in his future administration if he did so. I want to jump to one more story. So the Biden administration finally agreed to debate Trump, and CNN in particular is going to host next week. But RFK Jr. has failed to qualify for the CNN debate, setting up a showdown between Biden and Trump. This is from NBC News. The independent candidate did not meet the network's ballot and polling thresholds for the June 27th event. Independent Robert F. Kennedy Jr. failed to qualify for the first presidential debate hosted by CNN next week, officially setting up a one-on-one clash between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. CNN published an article Thursday morning that the network's window for candidates to meet the criteria for the June 27th debate in Atlanta closed just after midnight Eastern Standard Time, quote, with Biden and Trump meeting the constitutional ballot qualification and polling thresholds, end quote. A CNN spokesperson confirmed that Kennedy did not qualify. Kennedy hadn't hit CNN's polling threshold of 15% in at least 4 approved national polls, having only reached that mark in 3 surveys ahead of the deadline. He also fell short of the network's ballot criteria, which required the candidates to secure access in enough states to win 270 electoral votes, a significant task for a third party at this point in the election cycle. So the Kennedy campaign, I've heard messaging saying that they believe that they will be on enough ballots by November to gain the correct amount of electoral votes. But the polling issue has been consistent with debates. I remember the Republican National Convention had similar polling thresholds, and it was one of the things that eliminated a lot of people there. I want to pull RFK Jr.'s statement because I find it really interesting. You know, we know that third-party candidates can have an impact on the election. He said, Presidents Biden and Trump do not want me on the debate stage, and CNN illegally agreed to their demand. My exclusion by Presidents Biden and Trump is undemocratic, un-American, and cowardly. Americans want an independent leader who will break apart the two-party duopoly. They want a president who will heal the divide, restore the middle class, unwind the war machine, and end the chronic disease epidemic. So what are your thoughts on this? is the debate going to turn the tides of this election? Or do we think that the third party candidacy is going to have a major impact? Because it is interesting that he seems to be have a significant performance, but this network was ultimately able to shut him out. You guys have any takes on this?
I think Kennedy's a clown, but I think that they should let him debate because having the other person up there isn't it shouldn't be a problem. And honestly, I think that the reason they don't let him debate is because it only makes President Biden look worse.
It's interesting because Biden was ultimately the one who said, we can debate, and Trump had always been open to it, but they're only going to debate twice. Typically, during presidential election cycle, the presidential candidates have 3 debates. It seems like maybe that's, maybe they just think it's boring. We already did this once, but maybe also Biden knows that 3 is too many. He can't sustain it. I don't have any thoughts on the debate.
Look, I think that Kennedy definitely helps Trump, and that's probably why he's been under the type of attack in the media that he has been under. He is a clown. I mean, his positions are extreme. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about the Democratic Party and like this state of introspection. What's their identity? They don't even have a real vision of what they're going to be as a party. So, and I also think Kennedy, who used to have a massive social media presence, he still does. He does a lot of shows on social media. He understands the importance of a debate to get out there and get in front of millions of so-called normies who aren't on social media and get his message out there. And they're blocking it. And I think no matter what, though, it's still going to help Trump.
Do you think any independent candidate will ever be able to make one of these major networks debates in the modern era?
Probably not at this point, as long as a duopoly, and I completely agree. There is a duopoly, and that's why the moment, that there was talk about a potential third party or like a revamp of the Republican Party, there was such like a screech, like, no, that's impossible. You're not going to do it. It's just not part of the power structure. It's not going to happen. And I don't see it happening. I don't know what you guys think.
Ross Perot pulled it off in 88? Was it 88? It was Clinton and Bush Sr., and then Ross Perot came in as this third party Texan. Yeah. Let me tell you something. And he had a bunch of signs. And I don't know if he just bought his way on. He had a lot of money. I think he was a big oil
guy, yeah.
So he might have just bought his way onto every ballot and paid for, what was the other thing you need to do?
You have to have enough.
Oh, yeah.
So 50% and 4%. And then you also have to be on the ballot in enough states. Like basically.
So you can buy your way onto the ballots. As far as I know, that's just money. I don't know if it's just money, but you need a lot of money to get on the ballots.
I'm also pretty sure that
signatures.
The rules, well, I'm not sure, but I imagine the rules, 40 years ago were fairly different, 35 years ago, whatever it was. So
And there's no internet. So he puts some commercials on at the right times in the right places. I don't know what he spent on it, $1.6 billion. The dude, he bought his way on. So if you're not a super wealthy third-party candidate, that's a bigger challenge.
I will say, though, that I think Biden's entire presidency rests on this debate. I think if he does relatively well, whatever that even means, he'll likely remain the candidate. If he doesn't, you're probably going to see a lot of action around the DNC convention in Chicago.
You were mentioning other Democrats that are looking for that role. Do you know particularly anything behind the scenes? Did you hear stuff?
Look, the DNC convention's in Chicago. It's Michelle Obama's hometown. Obviously, she's still very popular within the Democrat Party. She could probably move the needle in many ways. And obviously, she's probably a much more attractive candidate to the left than Joe Biden is today. You have people like Gavin Newsom. I live in California. He's a horrific governor there, in my opinion, but, he's more presentable on TV, younger, more articulate, if you want, than Biden. So you have these type of candidates that, should Biden completely, malfunction or collapse in many ways on the debate with Trump, and his ratings continue to decline, I think they're at historic lows right now, that call to replace him is going to get louder and louder.
Do you think that he would comply, though? To me, it's always seemed like there's a power struggle between the Biden machine that's in the White House versus the DNC itself. It's almost as though initially, back in the day when they were campaigning, they were like, Joe, it'll be great. Be a 4-year president. Then we'll elect the new leadership. He sort of messaged like this, that he would be the end of this old guard of Democrats. And then just step down in glory. You've served your time. And it seems like the Bidens maybe said yes to that, but ultimately were like, we're here for 8 years. All of our grandchildren get married in the White House. We're never leaving for as long as we possibly can.
Well, there's a thing called the 25th Amendment, and and I think should he, like I said, I think this debate is make or break for him. If he doesn't do well, you're probably going to have whispers saying, "Hey, look, we have cabinet members who are talking." You have the special counsel, who's talking about your mental decline. He's saying that you're not competent to be prosecuted, but you could still be president. That really resonated. I mean, that was strategically leaked, I think. I mean, a lot of that stuff was like declassified for the American people to actually understand. So when you put all that in tandem, I think that they will force him out, and they will use the 25th Amendment, the special counsel's investigation into him, the various congressional investigations into him, as the way to basically tell him either you resign or we force you out. So we'll see what happens on the debate. That's just really what I think. And I also will land on this. I think that the reason the Republicans haven't increased the heat, like Jamie Comer, Jim Jordan, some of these others, Matt Gaetz, in Congress with these various investigations, is because they don't want to burn him before the debate, before the convention. I think it's in our interest, meaning the Republican Party, to keep Biden where he is, but it's obviously not in the Democrats' interest.
So if the debate doesn't go in Biden's favor, if he fails to perform in some way, if Trump outmaneuvers him, you think that we'll see more aggressive action towards Biden from other branches of government?
Yeah, I could predict that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, no doubt, actually.
It is interesting because it would be like the start of a lame duck period. People really don't think that he can recover from his abysmal approval ratings if people don't feel motivated to vote, because he is his legacy is difficult to defend, and also young voters don't seem to be captivated by Biden, whether it's because of a political interest that they have or just generally they are not super motivated by whatever Biden is trying to offer them. I felt like when he ran in 2020, a lot of it was like, do you remember Obama? He was a cool guy. And I was there too. And also that guy's pretty bad. But now you have to defend your own legacy saying, you know how much you pay at the grocery store? Yeah, that's me. And also gas prices and also insurance. But look at Trump. You know, he's in court, and that's very, very bad. So vote for me. I don't think that it sells this messaging of I am not as bad as the other guy doesn't sell the same way right now.
It doesn't. And it's really, politics, optics is reality. And it's like the messenger is more important than the message sometimes. And Biden just doesn't have it. And when you're trying to attract youth, Hollywood, whatever you want to call it, entertainment, have a media presence, social media presence, if you don't have those two, you're kind of out of luck. And that's where Biden's finding himself right now.
I agree.
I mean, especially considering the fact that the youth vote is so strongly pro-Palestine.
Yeah. And
that makes the old guard of the Democrat Party really, really nervous, because there are a lot of Jewish people that are in the Democrat Party that are big donors that have historically been reliable Democrats and reliable donors. And with the behavior of a lot of the leftists and the way that I think they're intimidating a lot of the old guard Democrats, and I think that you're seeing that split between the progressives and your Joe Manchins. Manchin's, I guess he's left and he's gone independent, which
should tell you something, though.
Yeah, it should. Going independent is not as important. Like, if you go independent and you still caucus with the Democrats, it doesn't really matter. But
the first major piece of legislation I saw him supporting was co-sponsored by like 40 Republicans. Yeah,
which is good. And you're going to see more of that. You're going to see more people that either used to be Democrats or used to be independents saying, look, we have to vote for, a Republican because of this issue, or whether it be the border, or whether it be, people that don't want to fund Israel, or people that don't want to see anyone supporting the Palestinians. Both sides have a reason to leave the Democrats, and I think that that's the biggest problem that they have, is the progressives have gotten so progressive to the point where the DSA is, actual communists. DSA are basically running the government of New York City, and they're largely influential in the White House. I mean, there's the Dear White Staffers Instagram page, and all they do, they're extremely pro-Palestine, and they're definitely a whole lot of communists there, and that's making rifts in the Democrat Party, because your average person still does not want to see things like, oh, you can't own a home, or you can't rent out a room in your home or part of your home, or those kind of policies that the communists just refuse to give any on. That they are ideologically against things like property, things like they call small business owners the petit bourgeois. It's like they're against that in their philosophy, and that is abhorrent to essentially anyone that thinks they're pro-America, anyone that likes the idea of the American dream, that you can, start a business and own a home, and you can do these things and better your life, go from one economic class and actually raise yourself to another. I mean, it's possible. It's not easy. And I know right now, because of the economic conditions, it's significantly harder than it's been in the past and stuff, but it's still an attainable goal. And there are people in the government that don't believe that it is, and don't want it to be an unattainable goal, because they believe that kind of stuff only creates inequality. The Democrats have to acknowledge that, and Joe Biden is totally unprepared to do it, I think.
I think so too. I want to jump to this next story and talk a little bit about the consequences of a differing ideological space, especially in light of a lot of recent protests. So we've seen a lot of action in America of pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine, whatever you want to call it, protests on student campuses. But in Europe, there's a wave of environmental protests that are sort of sweeping the nation, and you're seeing a lot of direct conflict, a direct vandalism from people who want their governments to swear off oil. So this is from the organization Just Stop Oil. They posted today, I've got a fuel non-proliferation treaty, baby, and I'll write your name. Just Stop Oil paints private jet hours after Taylor Swift lands. 2 Just Stop Oil supporters have painted multiple private jets on an airfield where Taylor Swift's jet landed a mere hours before. They are demanding that the incoming UK government commit to working with other governments to agree on an equitable plan to end the extraction and burning of oil and gas and coal by 2030. So you'll see some images here. You have these young activists who spray painted these jets. One of them, Cole McDonald, who's 22, said, "We're living in two worlds, one where billionaires live in luxury, able to fly in private jets away from the other, where unlivable conditions are being imposed on countless millions. Meanwhile, this system that is allowing extreme wealth to be accrued by a few to the detriment of everyone else is destroying the conditions necessary to support human life and a rapidly accelerating, never-ending, quote, cruel summer. Billionaires are not untouchable. Climate breakdown will affect every single one of us." So that's obviously an allusion to Taylor Swift. This comes the day after other activists from Just Stop Oil sprayed orange dust all over Stonehenge, the 5,000-year-old monument, right on the eve of the summer solstice celebration there. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, condemned the incident, this from BBC, as a, quote, disgraceful act of vandalism. A leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Harmster, I'm not even pronouncing that correctly at all. I'm just keep going. So the damage was outrageous and described Just Stop Oil as pathetic. Members of the public were heard shouting no and seen running to intervene as campaigners ran up the stone circle at the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So environmental activism has a history of being very public. I know in the U.S. we can talk about Weather Underground and their actions, especially in the 70s and 80s. It seems like European environmental activists in particular are similar to American progressive activists in that they want their demonstrations to be bold and in front of your face. You'll see this often in the U.S. with people will go, throw stuff at paintings in the National Portrait Gallery. Is this part of this younger generation? Why are we seeing this happen? Or is this something that every generation does and we just feel like it's different?
Well, these people are stupid. If they got what they wanted, what they're afraid of would happen immediately, right? If you stop using fossil fuels, then you stop being able to fertilize the crops that are providing food aid to places that don't have the ability to grow crops. You stop the production of all of the ability to transport food around the world. These people are so incredibly stupid, they can't even understand that if they got what they wanted, millions and millions and millions, billions of people would die. Literally billions. If they got if you did the whole just stop oil. This is absolutely ridiculous. And these people are, I mean, I know that you can't explain anything to them, that they have been totally co-opted by ideologues. I know that there's a whole ton of the environmental, not lobby, but the environmental movement and stuff is really about getting rid of capitalism. They say that capitalism is what causes all the environmental problems, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's totally the opposite of history. Like, you can look at what happens when you open markets. You can look at what happened in China. Even though China isn't a capitalist society, they were having a problem, massive problem feeding their population until they opened the markets, and once they opened markets and allowed people to have some amount of control over their property and control over their time, not a lot, but some, you had this massive explosion of economic activity, and you had a whole bunch of people that could feed themselves. And when you allow markets to thrive, you have fewer poor people. You have fewer people die of starvation. There is no such thing as a poor country that uses a lot of energy. And energy is what keeps human beings alive. If you have a low output of energy from your country, that means you are going to have only so many human beings that can survive in that country. There is no such thing as a low energy rich country. It doesn't exist. And rich countries are how you feed your populations. There are going to be people that are going to excel beyond what other people would consider reasonable. They're going to make more, and they're going to be more productive, and they're going to have success in ways that upset people that see the world in such a myopic way. But that doesn't change the fact that if you have markets and you have some amount of property rights, this will prevent your citizens from starving. And oil is what makes the entire economy go. This is idiocy.
Yeah. You said myopic, short-sighted. It's like first order thinking. Yeah. It's like they look at, okay, oil is posing this sort of problem. Therefore, if we remove it, good thing will happen. It's just first order thinking. They're not thinking about the consequences of their behaviors of removing oil, which you're pointing out. On top of that, it's ignorant. They don't have the information understanding that the carbon in the air can be recaptured and reused. So you really want to get more oil and burn more and then recuperate more and turn it into graphene so you have more building materials. So it's stupidity mixed with ignorance, but it's just loud people. It's very easy for humans to go monkey and to get together in big groups and start banging on stuff and throwing paint on crap. And that's what we're looking at right here.
Well, also, did you know statistically, it's developing countries that are the biggest producers of greenhouse emissions today? So basically what these people are arguing is, let the West have its oil, have its development, but you developing countries that we, in theory, support, you're not allowed to develop at the same pace that the West did. So that's the first thing. You know what also oil and natural gas does? It prevents war.
Yep.
You know what happened when George W. Bush was president? Russia invaded Georgia, and they continue to occupy about 20% of Georgia. You know what happened when Obama was president? Putin moved in and took over Crimea. You know what happened when Trump was president? There was no war. You know what happened when Biden became president? There's a full-on war right now between Russia and Ukraine. Do you know what the missing factor was here? When Trump was president, as I mentioned earlier, he unleashed American shale and oil and created a net exporter out of America for the first time since World War II. This depressed prices. It allowed America to control the global trade, the global energy routes, production, and our foes or adversaries, whatever you want to call them, countries like Russia, did not have the money to go on a full-scale war like they're doing right now, where oil is at almost record levels, while with Trump, it was almost a record down pricing. So that's also something that these kids, they're protesting, they're doing whatever they're doing, and they might actually be protesting Russia, but actually by what they're doing, they're actually filling Putin's coffers. So it's actually ironic. Maybe they don't know what they're doing. Some of this has actually been probably financed by some of these groups who want to see oil prices high, and they want to see the destabilized oil market, and they want to see countries like the UK not produce its own oil and natural gas. So it's really stupid what they're doing, and I don't think they really know they're even up to.
I think a lot of young people were sort of groomed into thinking dramatic acts of protest for progressive causes were cool and were ultimately sort of heroic in this way, right? I know a lot of millennials will report that one of the reasons they either defer or don't have children is because of their climate anxiety, so to speak. They're so concerned about the impact their children could have on the environment that they think ultimately would be better not to have them. And that's the sacrifice, this right decision they're making for other people. And I think some of it might be the rise of Greta Thunberg. I know, for a while, I ran into a high school teacher when I was, after I graduated college, who was like, wow, she's just an amazing, teenager and walking out for the environment and this, that, and the other. There was sort of a celebration of young people who put the environment above everything else. I think it is misleading. I'm happy for people to have pet causes that they feel passionately about, but some of these acts of ultimately protest, but vandalism, and some of the demands that go with them don't seem logical to me, and they don't seem thought out. It seems like it is about being able to get your picture on the news as opposed to making really impactful trainings for potentially, whatever you think you're doing.
Yeah, Churchill, I think it was, who said it. That if you're not a liberal when you're 25, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative when you're 30, you have no brain. And look, we were all in university at one point. We all kind of wanted to be part of the group. We all wanted to be part of that herd mentality. Like we've seen so many people attach themselves to a lot of these pet projects, like you just mentioned. And I think a lot of these people, I'm assuming most of them are young. I see some older guys and women in that picture, but I think they just want to be part of something greater than their boring lives. And I think a lot of them are just like really misguided and misinformed, especially when it comes to this particular issue. Actually, what they're doing is they're causing more devastation, more havoc, more war, and less economic growth in the developing third world that they, in theory, want to provide for. So it's actually fascinating to see why they would be protesting this when actually there's so much evidence that what they're protesting actually doesn't cause harm to people in the globe.
I wonder if ultimately the end goal of all of this is chaos, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, all of this is to have generations that blame older generations for their issues and avoid making a younger generation because they think it's all doomsday. I mean, at what point does chaos become the name of the game, whether it's for environmentalism or Palestine or anything? What point is that the end goal?
Well, I mean, I personally think that, a stable civilization doesn't revolt, right? So if you have a happy civilization that is mostly comprised of people that feel like they have meaning in their lives and they're satisfied with their lives, those people aren't going to be prone to be agitators for some kind of significant social change. There are people that have that kind of mentality anyways, that there's always going to be a certain segment of the population that is just that kind of like protest kind of person, and that's what they enjoy doing and stuff. But most people, if they feel...
Can't they just go listen to metal music and destroy some rooms or something?
You'd think you could just go get in the pit and get it out. But sometimes, they can't. So that being said, people do have to have meaning in their lives. And the more you can have a connection to your community and your family and stuff like that, the more you have that, the less likely it is that you're going to have some kind of revolution or some kind of significant social change. And I think if you look around at the messages that are being sent by the government, again, things like the alternative lifestyles, right? And if you want to have an alternative lifestyle, I don't care. But if the government is going to have a message, it should be pro-social messages, which means pro-family messages. You can live an alternative lifestyle in the United States, and that's not a problem. We don't have to have all of the focus be on alternative lifestyles and make it out as if traditional lifestyles are to be hated or to be scorned or it's bad. These traditional lifestyles are actually what makes a solid foundation for your whole society. So the idea that the federal government is messaging to the people people that it is bad to marry and have kids and do these kind of things. And it's messaging to the people that we want to center alternative lifestyles and stuff. That is a terrible, terrible recipe for your society. And we see it in the fact that you've got men that are not achieving in massive amounts the way that they used to. Men are failing. Men are falling behind in going to college. Men are dropping out of society. Men are not taking up the roles that men typically have taken up as leaders in society. Society basically treats men very badly. You've got a push to have women not start families. You have a push to have women go into
the workforce and stay there forever.
Exactly. And whereas it's fine if women go, you can, again, in a liberal society, you can have that and have that be something that women can do. But the idea that the government pushes that narrative is terrible, and it's anti-social, because the foundation of your society is the family. So I think that there are people that want to see the fundamental structures that make up the United States broken down. I think things like property rights. I think things like family units and traditional families. I think all these things inhibit the revolution that the far left wants to see. And so the more you have these kind of ideas put into the center and put as the idealized lifestyle, the more you're going to see destabilization in your country, and the more you're going to see depression, and the more you're going to see suicides, and the more you're going to see young women deciding that they hate their lives, and young men checking out, and people saying that they don't trust each other and stuff. These are all symptoms of policies that the government has been pushing for, at the very least, like I said earlier, since 2012. Possibly since before, arguably since before, because of the media and et cetera. So that's my sense of the situation.
Yeah, it's tough to tell. To answer your question about if it's people are foisting chaos on the world, or if they actually believe, it's just tough to tell. At this level of the orchestrators of these people that are spray painting Stonehenge, I tend to guess that they're mostly just like useful pawns, but the people that really want to sow chaos and confusion are maybe funding it. I mean, you mentioned earlier, George, you thought maybe people were funding these things. I think you'd said something earlier about that.
Yeah.
That might be part of it, is like, yo, let's tear some shit. Let's like go confuse some people.
I think some of it might even be a devotion to ideology, right? That the thing that you are trying to do is so important that any other sort of cultural societal rules get thrown out. Like, never mind the fact that Stonehenge is 5,000 years old, is meaningful to a lot of different people. Covering it in dust is so important because it represents this greater issue that everyone must pay attention to, whether they want to or not. And I think we see that replicated in a couple of different places in society. I'm gonna pull this story. So there is a clothing brand that was removed from removed from TikTok because of a controversial ad. And I bet you guys can already tell me why as soon as you hear the name of it. So XXY Athletics suspended from TikTok after releasing pro-women's sports ad. This is from SCNR.com. Shout out to Chris Bertman. Jennifer Say, speak up, stand up, vote with your dollars. Don't buy brands that don't know what a woman is. Truth is counting on you. XXY Athletics, an athletic wear company founded by a former Levi Strauss company executive and backed by a former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines, was permanently suspended from TikTok after its latest ad on the platform. Founder Jennifer Say announced her company was banned from TikTok in an X post saying, quote, when you run an ad standing up for women's and girls sports, you get banned for life from TikTok, end quote. Say shared the advertisement in question along with her post. Quote, if you think girls and women's equality matter, stand up, says the voiceover of a video. I'm going to play the video rather than read it to you because I think it's important to show kind of what exactly is offensive to TikTok. So let me see if I can get this going. Should I open this up over here? Do we have sound on this? There's no audio for us? Okay. Well, then I'll read it from Scanner. If you think girls and women's equality matters, stand up, says a voiceover as the video depicts a series of female athletes. If you think, Quote, if you think girls and women's sports matter and you want your daughters to have an opportunity that you had, stand up. Quote, if you know that it isn't fair or safe to allow males to compete in girls' sports because it's, well, obvious, stand up, the narrator adds. Then Jennifer Say also shared the communication she got from TikTok for Business. Dear XXY Athletics, your account has been permanently suspended because it doesn't comply with our advertising policies. They recommended that they review the ad, and they can also work with their sales representative. But they said ultimately a review indicates that your advertising content may violate TikTok's advertising by featuring an offensive content.
Now that's hilarious. The idea that XXXY as a concept is offensive. This is, I don't know who makes the decisions and stuff, but like the idea that you can't talk about the fact that there are men and women and that's too offensive. I don't know what to do with this because it is so insane.
Yeah.
You know, I'm really at a loss. It's like, again, I talk often about the things that I believe our society can handle. I think that our society can handle having trans people walk around dressed in as if they are, as if men are women and women are men. And I think that most polite people would be able to deal with using whatever pronouns they prefer, just so long as they're not obnoxious about it. But the idea that you can't say, hey, it's like trans people can live their lives how they want, but trans women are men and trans men are women. Like the idea that you can't say that without being, attacked, be told that you're saying something offensive is ridiculous because that is just factually, biologically true.
I think it's wild that so many social media platforms, including TikTok, have accepted the trans ideology, transgenderism, lock, stock, and barrel, even though they are the same people who would often yell, like, you're supposed to believe science, trust science, this, that, and the other. Science tells us that there are biological differences between men and women, that male athletes and female athletes, even if they're competing in the same sport, perform very differently. That's why, the hoop for women's basketball is different. That's why female track athletes, report different times than their male counterparts, even if they're running the same race. And I feel sad for the generations of female athletes who will be told, hey, if you feel like this obvious disadvantage that you have against someone who is testosterone, who is biologically built differently than you are, but is allowed to compete in your race because they opted to use different pronouns, I feel sad for them because they're going to be told you are transphobic and you should change your minds rather than believe science, which I thought was the thing they wanted us to do.
And I think that's why when Trump actually talks about this at his rallies, he gets some of the biggest applause because people are just like, we want a sense of traditional values and normalcy. Just stick to the science, right? Stick to biology, to normalcy. No one is against people living their lives the way that they want to, as long as you're not hurting anybody. And I think everybody in this room and around America probably agrees with that. But when a small segment of the population, like we're talking like 0.5% to 2%, is trying to force something onto the vast majority, that's when there's the pushback. It's all about forcing something onto people that would normally not accept it, even though those people do believe in their right to live the way that they do want to live. And I think that's the major issue that we have seen, that the liberals as a whole are pushing on America, these various agendas, wokeism, DEI, whatever you want to call it. And it's actually dividing America more than uniting it.
I do. I think that's right. I mean, I think this is one of the fears. I touched on this a little bit before, but somebody wins when there's chaos and people can't unite. And I think with this issue, confusing, especially young female athletes, because I agree with you, like there is a level of, I want to say, if you're an adult and you want to live a certain way, I don't want the government or I don't want anyone to tell you you can't. On the other hand, specifically with the transgender ideology, it seems more and more about getting intervention into family lives earlier and earlier. And that is what the problem is for me. I think the fact that this seems to be an ideology that cannot compromise. They say we must have access to children. Children need to know this. They need to comply with this. High school athletes, young children should be taught about this. It should be in books. It should be everywhere, is inherently disconcerting. It makes me want to step back and say, what is this actually about? Your right to live a certain way or your ability to control and dictate the way other people's children should be treated?
So, I mean, if if I'm going to put on a little bit of a tinfoil hat here, like if you think, as I do, that there is actual concerted efforts by a subversive ideology to basically tear down the fundamental structures of our government, the LGBT stuff is the tip of the spear. And it really is motivated by an ideologically by ideology that is on par with any other religion. You can listen to trans people talk about saying things like trans people are divine. Trans people are to be held up as the epitome of what a human being could be. They have transcended not just male and female, but they have transcended being a normal human. It is completely and totally the more extreme you get is entirely wrapped in mysticism and occultism. If you remember when Target was getting a lot of heat for the LGBT stuff that they had, one of the artists, now I don't know if these shirts were actually the shirts in Target, but the artist that had drawn the shirts had done a whole line of pro-LGBT stuff that was all mixed in with occult stuff that was saying that transitioning is alchemy and all kinds of again, all kinds of occult imagery, satanic imagery and stuff. And again, I'm a dude, like, listen, man, I grew up listening to Cannibal Corpse, right? Tomb of the Mutilated is one of my favorite records, okay? I am totally fine with this kind of imagery. But the fact is, these people don't think of it as imagery like a horror movie, which is what I looked at that stuff. Like, I grew up watching slasher films when I was a kid, and I wanted to see Nightmare on Elm Street, and all that stuff was cool to me, and that was part of me being into gory death metal and stuff. This is not about that. This is actually occultism where people are mutilating their bodies. The ultimate part, the ultimate expression of this ideology is to transition. They're going to cut their bodies up. And this needs to be pushed back on. And again, we certainly cannot have a government that is flying the flag of the trans flag. We cannot have a government that is pushing an ideology that at its extremes is telling people to mutilate their bodies. You cannot become a female. You cannot become a male. You can change your body. And if you want to as an adult, I'm like, okay, fine. But you can't have this stuff fed to children because it is literally warping their minds and making vulnerable children destroy their bodies. The Tavistock stuff that was going on in the UK, I think it was called the Tavistock Clinic, they shut it down because of this. If you look at the cutting edge reports coming out of Europe right now, all of these European countries are pulling back on this and stopping it because they're starting to realize that these people need help, and help is not affirming their mental illness. Right.
So why is it that America is not doing the same thing? Why are we saying, West Virginia is one of the states battling this kind of issue where we are saying actually everyone should accommodate this, especially young students?
Because normies don't really believe it yet. Normies don't
believe what?
Don't believe that there are a lot of children trying to get some kind of puberty blockers, or they're trying to get actual surgery. Normies still think, what? No. Like literally what they think. They're like, what? No, people aren't doing that. Because, and part of the reason is because the left has so successfully made any ideas that come from conservative as radioactive. If a conservative says something, people that are normie Democrats think, well, it came from those crazy Republicans, and you know how they are. So it can't be true. And you hear about Anna Kasparian being like, oh, this isn't true about the migrant that cut up a human being. Like, and she was like, this isn't true. No, it's not true. Not true. And you can go all over Twitter and see the video of her going, it's true, guys. It's true. Because it is true. But the average normie Democrat has been conditioned to disbelieve anything that doesn't come from the official sources. So when they hear things that genuinely sound batshit crazy, they say, That's batshit crazy. It can't be true. But guess what? It is, guys. It's really true. So you have to be able to convince the average normie that these things are really happening. And once you do, they turn away. They're like, no, we have to stop this. And they change their mind. Once they realize that it's happening, they do. So this is, in my opinion, the tip of the spear of trying to destabilize the country. And I think that the more people know the extremes that the activists want to go, the more people will reject the left over the situation.
Well, I think where it gets even more insidious is like when you have these parents on these school boards that are kind of pushing back against this, and then they're deemed by like the director of the FBI and the attorney general as like potential threats to America. And that is something that I think is very insidious. And you see like the FBI going and knocking on people's doors who protest this type of stuff, and including doctors losing their licenses and their livelihoods, some even being imprisoned or, you know, charged with felonies for blocking this kind of stuff. And I think the more and more that type of stuff happens, and I think it will, because the more children are the ultimate targets, especially in schools, and parents feel that they're losing the ability to actually govern their children's lives, then the pushback will become real. I don't think it's at that point yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah, I think it is interesting how much all of this has exposed the fact that schools, the government, but definitely schools, treat the parents as though they are hostile and potentially bad for their own children. Every time I see one of these school boards or whatever that vote on bills that say, or rules that say, if a student, you know, wants to go by different pronouns or a different name, you can't inform the parent, right? Even though the child is a minor, even though they live at home with their parents, even though their parents are providing everything else in their life, hypothetically, you know, you can't tell the parents that their child is opting to go through this sort of gender ambiguous phase or transition or anything like that, because the apparent messaging is that the parent is the danger. And I think that's so wrong. I think we should treat the family like the most important unit in our society. It's the building block that everything else comes from. If parents are struggling, we should support them and help encourage them to grow as parents, but we should never make it so children are inherently learning you have to hide part of yourself from your parent, only tell us at school, keep secrets from them because we have your best interest at heart and they do not.
That alone should be the most obvious red flag.
Yeah.
Don't tell your parents. This is straight up cult behavior.
That's what predators do.
Yes, that is exactly what predators do.
But except for schools. Schools are like, no, but we're fine. You know, it's a really serious issue. I'm sure we'll continue to see this for a long time. But right now, we've got to go to Super Chats. I want to remind everyone to smash the like button. And if you're a member, get ready to join us on the Discord for our after show. It's great. The after show is one of my favorite parts because we get to get call-ins from people, hear your questions, hear your thoughts.
One like really is one FJB.
Yes, that's what I've heard. Remember, if you like this show, like the button and remind everyone that Brimcast is the best and that my dictatorship will reign forever. And if you don't like my dictatorship, please like the button anyways and become a member on Timcast.com. Send a strongly worded email to someone. I don't care. You know, if I feel like it, Tim will be back tomorrow. But Brimcast reigns on in your hearts forever. Guys, thanks so much. Okay, let me look at Super Chats. I'm blind and they're so tiny. I don't know how Tim does this every day. He must have better eyes than I do. Hold on. Wait, it's not. Okay. Is this Kel? First episode of Philcast. Let's effing go. Yes. Are you kidding me? Do I have to kick you out of my kingdom?
Look,
here?
Legitimately, she did all the work today. She's the one that actually did the opening and stuff. So
no, I've got to be serious. You know, I am really grateful to be on this show. I'm really grateful that Tim feels like he can, you know, take the day off to attend to his medical issues and leave it to us. And I really want to give a shout out to Chris Carr, executive editor. I think he's Chris Carr 17 on Twitter. He just let me bounce stories off him all day long. And, you know, he's not here. He's sometimes on the show, but he is really the backbone of a lot of the work that I do here. So shout out to Chris Carr. Let's see. I feel so scared to read them because what if the end of the sentence is something weird?
Oh, yeah, you got to be aware the entire time.
Okay. Big 7588 says, remember when an empty studio had better ratings than CNN? When is the next Chaircast? Chaircast was such an interesting time at Timcast. We weren't here yet, right, Phil?
I don't think so, no.
I was.
Yeah.
That was an intense
You're a Chaircast
evening.
veteran.
Yeah, I was actually not in the chair that was on the cast.
Really?
During that episode, yeah.
That's wild. Let's see. What does this say? Chafe something. The biggest conundrum for Democrats, if they get rid of Joe Biden, who can they replace him with to placate the? I can't read all of this. It's hard to beat a guy that showered with his underage daughter. Who do you think they would want? You were mentioning Michelle Obama before.
Yeah, I think they want Michelle. I think they want Gavin. I think they're ready for a new era. I think the AOCs and the so-called squad is a little too toxic. So I think they're never going to ascend to any real leadership roles. And actually, you've seen them diminished in terms of like any media presence. So I think they're going to prop up people like Michelle, Gavin, who are more establishment, more inclined to being part of the donor base. And
but you're naming two people I'm noticing that aren't actually in the federal government right now. It doesn't seem like anyone seems to say, like, occasionally we hear AOC, but it's not like there's an obvious Democratic senator or congressman or woman to step up to the plate. Why do you think that is?
Because they're just too extreme, especially at the federal and obviously at the local and state levels. Most of these people have just like really gone off the deep end, right? They don't even know what they stand for anymore. Biden obviously doesn't represent what a lot of these folks in Congress want to promulgate in America. So I think America is a center-right country, I think, in general. And the Democrat Party today has gone just so far left that they just don't really have anybody to appease the broader American electorate.
Do you think that we'll see a wave of Democrats that are more middle of the road running for these seats? Or do you think the Democratic voters in America are kind of conditioned to continue to pick the most progressive candidate on the ticket?
No, actually, I think they are going to go more center because they tried this guinea pig experiment that they were the experiment, meaning the American people or the people that voted for these people to get into power. They saw it didn't work out. They saw that crime is up. Their parental rights are diminishing. There are wars everywhere. And the identity of not only the family, but America as a whole has completely been usurped and replaced with something very foreign and something unrecognizable that even Democrats, normal Democrats, don't recognize. So I view them moving forward as finding somebody who's more center than where they are right now.
I thought that was the interesting lesson from Manchin, saying I'm actually going to leave after decades in office rather than continue this party. I'm going to change to be an independent for the last couple months of my term. That's kind of telling of the legacy of the party.
Yeah, I mean, you did see the influx of people to the Democrats that left the Republicans when Donald Trump won. But the reason for that was they were the establishment people. Yeah. They were not Republican. They're not Republicans or Democrats. They're just the establishment. Whoever is in charge is who they're going to be placating. And then should an actual establishment Republican ever get elected again, they'll go back to being establishment Republicans and give mild criticism at the Democrats about how the, tax rate should be 3% lower than what the horrible Democrats are saying. But there hasn't been any kind of influx towards the Democrat Party since. So that was almost 10 years ago now, and it's just been bleeding membership and showing rifts in its own membership for the past 10 years, so.
Let's see. Is it Chaser 90EK says Hannah Claire is a DEI hire in the host chair. Yes, that's me. I am our DEI hire. I'm representing the estrogen vote. I hope you guys all, I don't know, build kitchens in your houses so women are comfortable or something.
All right.
Let's see here. Stone Mason says, tell us, Ian, is Ian secretly Nikola Tesla? Time travel? Can you comment on that?
Yes, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, it turned out.
Do you think Nikola Tesla would have liked to talk about graphene?
I think his spirit, he'd be super jazzed about graphene, and his spirit is sentient and available. So if you want to commune with Tesla, he's happy to jive. Just think, Tesla, help me.
Energy is all.
That's true. That might have been his spiritual motto.
Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Okay. 2A Willie says Vietnam and China's Navy/Coast Guard clashed just yesterday. Do you know anything about this?
Vietnam's and whose?
China's.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. There's a lot of oil and natural gas in the South China Sea. They have a very hostile maritime boundary that they have not even really, ossified in any treaty. And the longer this persists, I think with the United States wanting to create havoc the way that they want to by isolating China, you're probably going to continue to see that happening.
I wonder, too, what kind of response the Biden administration will have to this. Because sometimes I feel like they're kind of closing their eyes, right? It wasn't like the State Department. I mean, maybe the State Department did put out a message and I just didn't see it in time. It was the embassy in Hanoi. It seems like we're trying to silo our response to that. Is that because we don't want to acknowledge what's happening in that region, or is it because there's a lack of leadership? Like, what is America's role in all of this right now?
There is no role. And that's exactly why we went from the Abraham Accords under Trump to all-out chaos in the Middle East. That's why we went through peace through strength to chaos all around the world, why we have wars today, not only in the Middle East, but in Ukraine. We have Azerbaijan attacking Armenia. We have hostilities between NATO members, Greece and Turkey. We have this crisis now brewing between Vietnam and China, because all of these countries now feel that Biden is weak. And when you have a weak president, you project that and our adversaries become more emboldened. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's a big detriment to the country right now. And I think something voters should take seriously going forward.
Absolutely.
Demeanor says, hey, Tim, happy West Virginia Day. Best state in the union. Shout out from a former Huntington, West Virginia police officer. Happy West Virginia Day, everybody. It marks the anniversary of West Virginia being admitted to the union.
Great.
Does New Hampshire have a day?
Congrats.
I don't know.
Must.
I assume there probably is some kind of New Hampshire Day. But
I feel like every state should have one, but I believe strongly in the importance of regional culture.
look, there is no part of me that thinks that one state is going to hear another state has decided that they've got a state day and then not say, well, we need one too. So I'm sure that there are state days for every single state.
No, I feel like that's something Texas would do, but it's like not something Connecticut would do. Connecticut would be like no celebrating.
Connecticut's the Constitution state.
Yeah, I wish too, but I just don't think they would. What about Illinois? Would they, or California? Maybe California does have a day. We just don't know about it.
I don't. I have no idea the way things are going. They're rewriting history and replacing it with God knows what. So
New Hampshire does have a day. It's September 7th, by the way.
Nice.
I think it's just state holidays. They just worship locally.
probably.
They worship locally. I think it should be, though. I think that states should give workers the day off. If you work for the federal government, don't do that. Just work for your state government. It seems like it would be a good idea to have, these celebrations, especially if it coincided with like the state fair and you could go see like what was going on, especially in your agricultural community, if that's relevant to your state.
Well, the Democrats hate states' rights, so anything they could do to take those away, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let me see. I'm so sorry, I can't read anything. Otak Magnet says the Biden admin has purposely imported a foreign army. We won't have a civil war. We'll be fighting several foreign armies within our own country. I think that's somewhat true. I don't want to speak definitively, but I do think that our national security is compromised by the fact that we have this open door at our southern border, and anyone of fighting age with any ideology could come through, and we wouldn't know where they are, and we don't know what they would be doing.
It's fair to say that we don't know, but it's not fair to say that it's not possible, right? Like, you can't say that it's not possible. You can't say that there aren't sufficient people that have come across the border illegally where that would be some kind of, something that could manifest in reality. You can say it's unlikely, but you can't say it's impossible. And to be honest with you, the federal government should be able to say, no, that's not possible. They should be able to say, no, it is not possible. We have too much understanding of who is coming and leaving our country. It is not possible that an entire division worth of people have infiltrated the United States. But they can't say that.
Yeah. Which is not a good look for our leaders, right? If you're in charge of securing the border and you can't say definitively, yes, you are safe in our country. I would personally vote for new leadership, but I'm merely a conservative.
And I think that's exactly why the border is the preeminent issue this election. And it's really a stark and diametrically opposed policy between both Biden and Trump. And the clear winner in this particular issue is Trump.
Yeah. Okay, Jason Lindholm says, please, Timcast crew, wish my wife, Shauna, a happy birthday. She is doing a September walk for Alzheimer's. Hope Tim is okay and gets well soon. P.S. My wife loves Phil.
Cheers.
Happy birthday, Shauna.
Happy birthday, Shauna. I say this all the time, but we have husbands who will super chat in and be like, I'm at the hospital with my wife as she's giving birth, or like my wife just had her first baby. Like she's doing this thing. I really like the proactive husband energy. I would always wonder, is your wife listening? Does she also listen with you, or is this happy birthday going out into the void here? Does she know you're doing this nice gesture?
I mean, they'll clip it because it stays on YouTube. So
maybe so. Okay, let me look for some more stuff here.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I hope so. It's just that I'm, I guess, blind. I can't read anything.
You can read them all.
I can read them all, every single one. There's some person, Marky Mark is just asking, am I real? You guys have
You personally?
I don't know. I think he's asking about himself, but maybe if you want to comment on if you're real,
I can't
hold the
comment.
table.
I don't know.
It would be interesting to know.
Have to know you. To know you.
Oh, okay. This one's good. So, Gahent said, it's XX minus XY. It's a play on words, female minus the males. Oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense.
Oh, is it minus Y? I thought it was just specifying XXXY as in there are men and there are women.
Like this is one and this is the other.
Yeah. Maybe the minus
If it's,
thing.
is that how you would pronounce it? XX minus XY? That's a very long name for a company.
Yep. That's not
I
a good
thought it was
brand.
XX.
What do you guys think it is? Somebody give me some branding.
I thought it was XXXY.
That's what I thought.
As in there's two separate groups. Either way,
X minus XY.
maybe like when you see the logo on like a shirt or something, that symbolic meaning comes through, but you pronounce it XXXY. Okay, somebody call Riley Gaines. Since she backed this, have her clarify for me. Okay.
Yeah, because you wouldn't subtract XY from XX to get anything meaningful. You'd have to subtract XY from XX plus XY if you really want just an XX system. So I'm going to take issue with what you said. I don't think that says XX minus XY.
I feel like that's just too long, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Okay, Missy Kin says, Hannah Claire, if they conscript women into the military draft, do you think that they will have to admit what a woman is? At least Leah Thomas is a man to the Olympics committee. Great show. Thank you for the support. I'm glad you like the show. I know everybody misses Tim, but it's too late. We're in my dictatorship. It's my era. I think this is the biggest conundrum that the conversation around admitting women to the draft has right now. From what I understand, the rule is they're going off of biology. So like, if you identify as a trans woman, but you're biologically male, you're still expected to sign up for the draft. And if you are biologically female, but you believe that you are a trans man, then you are not necessarily treated the same way during military recruitment. The military does offer a certain amount of medical support for gender transitions and gender interventions. And I always think that's kind of questionable.
Kind of questionable? It's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely absurd.
Yeah. Well, especially since in the beginning, it was like something that the dependents of military members could have access to, meaning that the government was funding potentially minors who were wanting to transition. But yes, to a certain extent, I think they would have to acknowledge what a woman is. And I think that is why they're sort of trying to be like, women have to be here too. Everyone has to be in the draft. Then you don't have to talk about gender because everyone has to do it. It's stripping away these differences because I think they don't want the conversation to be, well, someone who is, female doesn't meet the same physical standards as men, and that impacts the way they go through basic training.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Do you think women are going to be in the draft?
Look, I think with all these endless conflicts that we've seen reinstated once again after, the Bush era, they're going to need men, women, he, she's, they, their, whatever, to fill those ranks because the conflicts are going to continue to grow. You're going to see, conflict in Europe, Asia, Latin America. There's a lot of conflict on the African continent right now. So I think that just really portends the draft being reinstated, and all of these people who are hating on Trump are probably thinking now, wait, I really don't want to go fight in Tajikistan, or I don't want to go fight over Taiwan.
Well, they're going to come here so we can fight them here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I think Trump's
joke.
looking a lot more appealing at the moment right now. So
yeah, it's interesting, right? Everyone's women are really into the draft until they themselves possibly could be drafted. I'm not into the draft, just to clarify that. at least for women. So Angela H says, "Hey gang, does anyone know what's going on with Trump's gag order?" If you know, correct me, but from my understanding, Trump's gag order in New York extends during the period until he is sentenced. So he's still under the gag order. Obviously challenging for someone who's in the middle of a campaign, and this is becoming something that his opponents want to use as a major issue, that he has these legal complaints against him.
Yeah, no, that's my understanding too. And this entire scam has been designed for one reason and one reason only, and that is to interfere in this election. And secondly, as the priority right now, it's to keep him off the campaign trail. And obviously by suppressing his voice and his messaging, it does that. So whether it's him physically on the campaign trail or him tweeting or, posting or on Truth Social, it's the same effect. So that's where we are. And as he says, if they could do it to me, they'll do it to you. And he's just standing in the way.
Do you think that changes Americans' perception of him? Because there was an argument for a while that he was just like kind of loud, brash guy. He says these inappropriate things. Do you think Americans who were maybe against him or found him sort of uncomfortable or unpalatable are more sympathetic because it doesn't seem like the lawfare that's against him is justified?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody respects and adores a martyr, right? And to millions of people right now, whether you're on the left, the center, or the right, including a lot of pundits on the mainstream media, they even think that these judges went too far. Most of them even think that these cases should never have been brought. So, of course, if that's being pontificated on television, then millions of people are also like, you know what? It was okay to mock him on late night, but he was president. And when you're doing this, you're disrespecting the presidency. And if you can do that, you're humiliating a nation. And I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. Do you think Trump's legal issues will impact who he selects as a vice president?
Yeah, I think, there's been arguments on both sides. One argument is he has to pick somebody so, I guess, toxic that he becomes like impenetrable, let's say, where he's just going to remain in office no matter what, because they don't want that person.
That guy is so bad. They're like Trump. He makes Trump look better.
Exactly. Or the other thought is that he gets a more moderate kind of guy like Ben Carson, an articulate guy, brings in the suburban vote, the minority votes, some voters that probably wouldn't have voted for him. So right now he's going to have to decide, no matter who he decides, he has to make a choice and make it soon, because that woman or man is going to have to campaign for him when he's likely in home confinement.
And do you think that there are any alternatives to home confinement that they would pursue? I've heard a couple of people say like they want the optics of him being in jail.
You know what? We're living in incredibly unstable and unprecedented times. I mean, I would have never expected what happened in 2016, where you had an entire, basically CIA operation weaponized against the Trump campaign, impeachment 1.0, 2.0, the various issues that have been going on, the January 6th stuff. So I can't say I'm 100% sure they wouldn't actually send them to prison. Maybe I'm just optimistic that I'm expecting home confinement, but that's where we are as a nation right now. It's incredibly crazy.
Yeah, I think it is pretty wild. And I think that only feeds voters' anxieties, which I always think Democrats do on purpose, right? They can't win based on, look, we've done such a good job. They can't point to Biden's economy and say, you've got more money than ever and you're all able to buy houses. They can't point to their foreign policy and say the world is very stable and peaceful right now. They can't point to anything, right? Even Biden's promises to forgive student loan debt have backfired on a lot of fronts. And so ultimately they need their voter base to believe that a potential Trump presidency would be so devastating that they need to do anything to prevent it. They need to fearmonger and have compliance. And that's a very disheartening way to look at your country, right? It's not about unity. It's not about investing in the future. It's not about, making this world better. It's about, trying to stay, compliant to the system that wants you scared. I don't like it. Okay. I'm going to look for a couple more super chats. Let's see. Matwes Manser. I'm so sorry. I cannot read anything or pronounce any names. Howdy, cast and friends. My coworkers and I watch the show every night. Where do you work where you're watching an internet show every night? I'm very interested.
Good job.
I hope your boss is watching with you. It would make my night if Ian said hello to Greg.
Hi, Greg. Hello, Greg.
Do people stop you on the street a lot and ask you to greet them?
They'll start talking to me, and
Yeah.
I'll just give them full eye contact. I want to know all about you.
That's so
I
funny.
like doing that.
Let's see. I got one more. Sorry, I'm going to scroll back up to the top because I realized.
Oh, yeah, you're about to get such a
like right at the
badass
bottom.
super chat, dude. I'm so into this.
Are you?
Yeah, let me have it.
What?
I want to know what the
Are you
audience
predicting
thinks.
the future?
Yep.
He's Tesla.
There's Robert Mora says, sorry, Phil. There are way too many stupid people who vote for anything to get better. We are all failing endlessly. Blind tribalism wins in this case. You got a response to that? A very negative take.
I mean, it's black pill time, I guess. I don't know that that you're right. I do understand having that kind of negative outlook because, I mean, I've been looking at this stuff for a long time. I've been sniffing around about it for a long time, trying to figure out what was going on, and there's only been a few highlights since like 2006. So we'll see how things go.
I mean, two things have happened, or a few things that have given you optimism.
Yeah, only a handful of things have
Like what?
been optimistic.
Tell us. Let's go out on a good note.
Well, I mean, the fact that Donald Trump won and he was so anti-establishment was good. Not that I don't think, like, I'm not particularly some kind of big Donald Trump fan, but he was very anti-establishment and he managed to pull back a lot of the veil that the media had essentially, had been feeding the American people, and he really made it fair. He made it fairly clear. And then, of course, the as much as COVID was a bad thing for the world, the fact that it happened, again, opened a lot of people's eyes. The lies that the government was telling about all the things surrounding it and stuff, and the
control that they wanted.
The controls they wanted, the government lockdowns and stuff. People were not. They didn't believe that the government would go to those lengths. There was always this, no, the government would never do that. And I think that has really made a lot of people think, well, maybe the government would do that. Maybe the government really will actually completely lie to the American people. And so as much as COVID overall was a negative, that is one of the silver linings. But there hasn't been a lot of very many things that in my opinion have been like, yeah, this is something that I feel good. I do feel like there are people now waking up and kind of joining the fight that are actually valuable in their people that used to be involved in either the establishment, like Manchin is a good thing, or people that that used to be Democrats that have left and stuff. The more that happens, the better it is. I think that the boycotts of Bud Light and Target were incredibly successful just because of the fact that it made people aware of what was going on.
I think awareness is the ultimate goal here. I think
Absolutely.
the fact that we have people who are awake to things that maybe they didn't consider, or people who through really difficult things like COVID came to realize that they need to stand up for the things they believe in. That is very important, not just going into this election, but generally in steering our culture in a direction that is more positive and more about the values that we hold as a nation. So with that, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to wrap up here so we can head over to our members only show. I hope you're all there. I hope you all have calls on the Discord. I'm just kidding. If all of you called, then we'd be here for the rest of the year. But thank you guys for everything you do. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. You can follow Tim on the internet. I think he's Timcast everywhere. I'm HannahClaire.B on Instagram. I'm HannahClaireB on Twitter. Thank you guys for your support. George, anything you want to shout out?
Thanks so much again for having me, guys. Incredible time, great things. You guys can all follow me on X at GeorgePapa19. I have a book out, Deep State Target. If you want to follow some of this CIA stuff I was talking about earlier, it's a riveting read endorsed by President Trump. I think you'll like it. And just hoping for the best for this country. I think we got to, get some normalcy back. We need some traditional values back, and we need to focus on the American people once again. And I think that's really what this whole topic's been all about.
Yeah, we tore off the bandage of like 100 years of funk, and it's like over the last 20 years we've seen this decay, and it's like, well, this is what it's been like. Now we just see it. And there's going to be a time when maybe you want to go into shock, or maybe you want to panic, but don't, because we can heal this thing. We just got to first make sure people know what's going on, and then collectively everybody does their part. And I'm at Ian Crossan. Follow me there. See you later.
I am Phil That Remains on Twix. I'm Phil That Remains Official on Instagram. The band is All That Remains. You can catch us this summer on the Destroy All Enemies tour with Megadeth and Mudvayne. You can check out our new single, Let You Go, on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube, Deezer, the internet. And don't forget, the left lane is for crime.
See you later, Phil.
Serge.
Peace out, y'all.
We'll see you guys on the after show. Come back tomorrow night. Thank you. Bye.